Will be good.
My Zoom keeps asking me to relaunch the meeting, but I can see you in the side panel, so let's press on. All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to this meeting of the Business Board, and I'm pleased to welcome members of the press and public who are able to join this virtual meeting online. In terms of technical arrangements, the meeting is being held by Zoom and will be live recorded for governance purposes. If you experience any technical difficulty during the meeting, please refresh your connection in the first instance. If it becomes apparent that we've lost members and we are no longer quorate, it may be necessary to adjourn the meeting. I will begin by calling the names of all members of the Business Board in alphabetical order to establish their presence for the record. Vic Annells.
Yeah, present.
Vic. Belinda Clark. I believe we have apologies from Belinda. Councillor Wayne Fitzgerald.
Didn't realise I was that early in the roll call. It's over here, Austin.
Thank you, Wayne. Mike Hurd. Faye Holland.
I'm here.
Hi, Faye. Mayor Dr. Nick Johnson.
I'm here, Austin.
Thank you, Nick. Good afternoon. Amir Khalid.
Yeah, present.
Al Kingsley.
Yes, Austin here.
Hi, Al. Andy Neely.
Yeah, here.
Afternoon, Andy. Nitin Patel.
Yep, I'm here.
Hi, Nitin. Rebecca Stevens.
Afternoon, Austin, everyone.
Good afternoon. Andy Williams.
I'm here, thanks, Austin.
Andy, and myself, Austin Adams. We're also required to record the attendance of the Business Board's Section 73 officer. So could Rob Emery please confirm his presence?
Yeah, I'm here, Chair.
Thank you, Rob. Declarations of interest. This is an opportunity to declare pecuniary interests or any other conflicts of interest. Do members have any conflicts to declare? Andy.
Yeah, on item 2.2, there's a mention made of Cambridge and I am a director of Cambridge and I've not paid by them and have no financial pecuniary interests, but I think I should declare it as a conflict.
Thank you, Andy. I too have a similar conflict in 2.2 in my relationship with the parent company of Metalcraft and their association with the college that are seeking additional funding. I think when we get to that item, it would be appropriate for myself and Andy to step out. And Amir, would you be kind enough to steer the group through that particular agenda item?
Yes. So if you could, if somebody could just guide me on the agenda item, I'll be fine. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Noted. I don't see any more hands raised. All right, then, turning to the minutes of the 14th of March 2022, we are asked to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of March 2022. So can I ask any member who does not agree with the proposal to click the raised hand function, the proposal being to accept them as is? I don't see any hands raised. So we will take that as carried. Thank you. Moving on to part 2. Oh, sorry, let me just go back on one point, if I may. Members have received an updated action log earlier today, which has also been published alongside the agenda on the Business Board's website. Do officers have any further updates to report on the action log to those already included in this recently circulated version? Don't see any hands raised. Hopefully everyone's received that. and many thanks to officers for updating that, cognizant of most recent discussions on bringing that fully up to date. Thank you. Moving on then to item 2.1, Strategic Funds Management Review. Steve Clark, the SRO for the LGF Fund and Market Insight and Evaluation, will present the May iteration of the Strategic Funds Management Review. Steve, are you with us?
Yes, hi, good afternoon, Chair and Board. So this is the usual report that provides the Board with an update on its strategic funding programmes. This report is performance up to the 1st of April, after which point papers were obviously drawn up. So diving in, programme spend, the LGF programme spend, the figure reported in this paper is the same as reported last time, so 142,657,000. This is because the completion of year-end figures has not concluded yet in time for the drawing of the paper. So that figure actually is as of 31st of January. It will obviously be updated for the next board update report. The 14.6 million of Getting Building Fund, that continues to be spent through the property company in delivering the Advanced Manufacturing Materials and Research Development Centre on the university campus in Peterborough. The shareholder agreement for Peterborough University Phase 3 project, that was amended and signed off by all the partners in the last quarter, and the spend has commenced on preparing work for the Phase 3 planning application and building. And that includes 2 million from the Business Board Fund that was awarded last year alongside the partners' contributions. The Community Renewal Fund, the first tranche of payment of 2,060,000 was paid on top of 800,000 match funding from the 3 councils. That was paid to the Growthworks contractor during March to enable that programme to commence. In terms of programme monitoring, the current monitoring update shows that there's a total of 6,234 jobs that have been captured from all the various projects and 790 apprenticeships created. And that was via our data collection in April with the projects. Members will see there are added graphs in Appendix 1, which show the LGF programme cumulative to date and also the month by month in year forecast and performance. Recycle growth funds. So in January, the board approved a strategy to award the first tranche of recycling funds. The category 1 call for projects was opened in February, and we received 6 applications which have been through the process and are shortlisted and presented in the next paper at this meeting. The category 2 call for projects was open during the last month, closed on 29th of April, and we received 9 expressions of interest which are currently being scored and assessed, and the successful applicants will be invited to complete full application, attend an assessment panel, and will be brought back to the Business Board in July for approval. The Community Renewal Fund update, the mobilisation of the 2 projects funded by CRF commenced in the last quarter. The current pipeline of beneficiaries for both projects and the first 3 months of outputs is shown in the tables in this report and more detail at Appendix 2 and 3. The profile of activity and outputs for the Turning Point project as of the end of March has shown good progress, but a slower take-up in Fenland. And obviously we're addressing that now with focused lead generation on the areas where there has been a lower take-up. The profile of activity similarly for the Start and Grow project in the same time period has shown excellent progress, particularly Huntingdonshire. But we are focusing our lead generation now entirely on Peterborough and Fenland to bring those up into line across those 3 districts. And with the CRF programme, on the 25th of March, the DLUC team wrote to all the lead authorities offering an extension of the programme until the 31st of December. This is because of COVID delays. We've accepted that extension, but we will only use the time we need to deliver the outputs and outcomes on those projects. Levelling Up, the prospectus for the second round was launched on 23rd of March, and we have a deadline of the 6th of July. We continue to work with our district council colleagues where they are putting together a LUF regen bid, and particularly Fenland, where they're well advanced on a LUF bid with our help. Also, the Combined Authority Transport team are currently shortlisting between 2 schemes to decide, this is between Fenland and Peterborough, which scheme should be put forward as the CPCA's Transport Authority LUF bid for the 6th of July. Shared Prosperity Fund update. Since the launch of the fund with its prospectus and guidance, we have started to pull together work on this. So the multiply element of the plan is being led separately. A separate investment plan is required for that to be prepared by the end of June, and that's being prepared and led by the commissioning call through the adult education budget, as much of what it needs to deliver is very similar and focused on adult numeracy. The core Shared Prosperity Fund element, officers have liaised through the Strategic Growth Ambition Board in March, and then subsequently the Cambridgeshire Public Service Board at the end of March, who have collaboratively and collectively agreed to support the development of the local investment plan. And in particular, the Cambridgeshire Public Service Board was invited and has agreed to be the strategic partnership board as required by government to oversee the creation of the local investment plan and to then sort of oversee and provide insight to the delivery. We've also consulted with the Business Advisory Panel. We will also seek the Business Board and Skills Committee's inputs on the final local investment plan prior to taking that through the CA board for its final agreement for submission at the end of July. In the background, the economic growth strategy and the employment and skills strategy have been used to help steer and guide what the objectives will be with our local authorities. Although there is a prescribed list of interventions that we have to choose from when creating the local investment plan. So that's a very, very quick canter through all the various funds that we have underway at the moment. So that's the update for this board cycle, and I'm very happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Steve. As ever, you've got an awful lot on your plate. Let's take questions. Andy Neely.
Thanks, Steve. That's really helpful. Do you, or has the Combined Authority done any analysis of the relative shares of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund? So I was looking at the links, and as far as I can tell, we got core funding 9.8 million. That's about 1.7% of what was allocated in the UK. And if you take the total figures, including the multiply, we got 13.8, which is about 2% of the total allocated. So the average MCA or GLA got, the average amount was 69 million, and we managed to get just under 14 million. So it'd be really good to understand what we didn't do and what we will do differently next time.
Yeah, okay, I can answer that relatively straightforward, Andy. It wasn't a competitive process. In the end, the formula used by officials in government was based on the old European funding allocations with small tweaks to do with population, because the old allocations were based on LEPs. We're obviously no longer a wider LEP footprint. So a tweak on population and then a small tweak based on deprivation and needs analysis. So essentially the 2% we were awarded is pretty much in line with the fact we got 2% through the European programs. And that's what's happened around the country. So those areas that obviously were in receipt of higher proportions of European funding similarly have now received far more, a similar level of, shared prosperity funding. So it's nothing to do with what we did right or wrong. It wasn't a competitive process. It was the formula they used was exactly as before.
And will that be the case next time round, as far as you know, Steve? So there's no influence we can have on this process.
Well, that's a really good point. I guess performance, if we're seen to deliver and others are not, then I suppose, yes, there could be a discussion to be had about that particular approach. I mean, we obviously thought there may be a chance that government would take a different route to previous formula. So I guess that's to be discussed and decided at this point. It's a political decision, I guess, as to how they run that next iteration. We've got this for 3 years, at least as it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Andy, let's go to Andy Williams, please.
Thanks, Steve. That's useful. Perhaps following on from Andy as well, and I'm sure you've answered this question before, but on Appendix 1, the key performance indicators seem to show a huge disconnect between the forecast and the actual in various categories. If we've really created 10 times more jobs than we were forecasting, that sounds like a huge achievement, and we should be shouting from the rooftops to generate additional funding. On the other hand, the apprenticeship seems to be considerably lower than that, which was forecast. So can you explain where we get these discrepancies? And can we get more robust indicators, if you like, if they're not accurate?
Yeah. Well, one of the first things I will say is that long list of indicators you see is actually the huge menu, if you like, of indicators that were possible to capture through local growth funding. So not all of them are a target for us. So what's recorded there are captured from projects, picking a selection of those particular indicators being delivered by particular projects. The 80 million, the first 80 million of the local growth fund given under the previous LEP was all on transport projects primarily, and one or two skills projects. And so those transport projects are long-term, and the delivery is very, very long-term into the future in terms of capturing those benefits. Most of the projects the business board has awarded to have been mainly around local business, higher job creation type projects, and some really good skills projects, which are proving to deliver more immediate benefits. So we will see the dial move. There was a period of cessation with the previous LEP, which of course hasn't helped us in terms of where we are with the delivery of some of the projects. So the curve shows that it will continue to grow, and we'll keep capturing it. We did lose one or two projects which were meant to contribute significant apprenticeship benefits, for example. So it will take time for the projects that we've re-awarded to come through and deliver into that. But I'm quite confident the high numbers and the jobs focus that we've had, we will see the incline, if you like, the growth of the outputs continue for quite a few years yet.
So I feel we're lacking a few superlatives here, Austin, in terms of delivery, that perhaps we should be focusing on a bit more when we describe how we're getting on. That's all.
Yep, no, agreed. Presumably the demise of the IMETs knocked a big chunk of the apprentice numbers out.
That was one of the failed projects I was thinking about, Austin. Yeah.
All right. Well, there's a lot of positives in there. Let's focus on the positives. I think that's Andy's point.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andy. Let's go to Al Kingsley.
Thanks, Austin. Andy's kind of preempted on the main point I wanted to focus on, but I think Steve's response is really helpful in terms of there are some positives there. But if I may, I think there's still a bit of challenge when we look at some of the projects that feed into that total of jobs that have been created so far. There are some of those kind of infrastructure projects like Borges Boulevard, Kings Dyke, that are showing a zero project plan in terms of the forecast versus 600 plus jobs created. And that, to me, looking at the data, kind of says we've either got a really poor grip on what we're forecasting, or how do we actually evidence the authenticity of these jobs created? What's the process for validating versus is it anecdotal data to really kind of back up, hopefully, what is that positive message that Andy was referring to?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And infrastructure projects, they are the more challenging ones to gather because they often take very long time to build, and then they take a very long time to deliver what was originally forecast. So we are, and quite often the folks who built it and the folks who potentially were in post to receive the funding can sometimes move on. So we do have some of those projects on our evaluation list for a different approach where we use external evaluators to go and get under the skin and obviously draw out all of those various benefits and outputs. But month by month, we are in touch with most of those that were in the delivery, the councils, or the actual delivery bodies. And we are canvassing, obviously, what's been created. The other thing was that some of those projects at approval early on weren't forecast to create that many jobs. Some of them were about a wider economic development piece, just to contribute to general growth and to unlock particular problems. Some of them roads, etc., bottlenecks. So, you know, there wasn't such clear-cut forecasts either on some of them.
Thank you, Steve. Al? Sorry, Vic.
Thank you. My question is probably easily explained. How long do we keep things on that form for? And I'm looking at one of them, signpost to grant, CPCA Growth Hub. And it's like finished monitoring was 2017, and it's still showing on that sheet. Just how long before we take things off?
Yeah, it's a good point. Actually, it's a matter of just keeping the record and transparency that we've left them on there, just to show where all the money has gone. We've even left some of the failed projects on there that started and stopped. So it's a good point. You know, it's probably something we should start demarking, which are, perhaps it's a case of moving them on the sheet slightly. So those that are historic now and those that are sort of still live collecting.
I think if I could just come back on that, Chair, and say, for me, it's all about making information available at the right moment. It could be that we have a second sheet that tells us about all past projects, but for me, we've so much to read that I'd find it so much easier if this was just the current relevant projects that we can influence, and perhaps then another sheet of things that are finished but are still there for accounting purposes, because it's just overwhelming the amount of information.
Okay, that's a good point. We can look at that. Yeah.
Thanks, Vic. I don't see any other hands raised. A couple of comments from me, Steve. I know the Combined Authority Board have asked for greater visibility of the performance of some of these investments. Now, whilst we can point to the fact that they can chase the links home in their document pack to find this information, it's a torturous thing to have to do, especially when they've got a 500-page plus board pack to work through. There's any thought that could be put into how we could better share this information with them? My second thought is it would be interesting to sort this report by before and after business board to reflect on the performance of the previous LEP in comparison to the performance of the investments that this board have made. Now, the last time we tested that, we were looking at a efficacy of 10-fold improvement. It would be comforting to know that we're continuing in that vein as these projects do start to unfold and get traction and deliver the real benefits over time.
Yeah, no, I think that's all doable. We can play around with this and get a before and after. Yeah, no problem.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I don't see any other questions. The recommendation here is just to note. Can we all agree that this has been duly noted? Please shout if you've got an issue. All right then, Steve, with thanks, we'll consider that noted. Good job as ever. Awful lot of things going on there. Great to see we're making solid progress. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move to agenda item 2.2. Item 2.2 is the Recycle Local Growth Fund project proposals. And in line with my declaration of interest for this item and with Andy Neely, we will leave the meeting for the duration of this discussion. But first, we need to establish whether this discussion will be held in public or private session due to the exempt appendices that it contains. The information in these appendices was exempt from publication under Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended, in that it would not be in the public interest for this information to be disclosed. Information relating to the financial or business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding that information. Does any member of the business board wish to discuss the content of either of the exempt appendices that support this item? Okay, great. In which case, I shall now leave the meeting. I know if someone has the technology to turn me on and off, or do I need to do that myself and dial back in? Nick, perhaps you could advise.
Hi, Chair. Yeah, no, we can remove you and then bring you back in.
All right, perfect. And with thanks, if Amir might introduce this part of the report. Nick, I'm not sure, has Amir got the chair's briefing notes? If not, could you help him with the recommendations, please, on this item?
I believe he's got them, but I will support him if he needs anything.
All right. Thanks, Amir.
Thank you, Austin. And Andy, are you in this or?
No, I'm being booted out as well, I hope.
Okay.
See you soon, Andy.
Okay, thank you very much. So I guess the recommendations are that you have shown 3 top projects which you are recommending for funding, and there are 2 options. One of them is to give the top 2 projects full funding, and then reduce the funding to the third one. And the second option is that there's reduction all 3 projects. I just want to ask somebody from the executive whether you have talked to the applicants about taking the cut. Is there a danger that one of these projects becomes unviable if we reduce their funding?
Good afternoon, board. Louisa here. Thank you for switching my video on. In terms of the recommendations, I have spoken to the 3 applicants who form part 2 of A, which would be a reduction in funding down to the 400,000. All 3 have said they are able to deliver at slightly reduced outputs, but still able to deliver. In terms of A1, which would be funding full projects ranked 1 and 2, and a very reduced, significantly reduced grant offer to 3. I haven't tested the waters on 3 in terms of whether they are able to continue to deliver. But from initial discussions around the reduction to 400,000, they said that was doable. Anything less would make it slightly more difficult. So I, from that, took it that a significant reduction would mean that 3 would not be viable.
Okay, and from I think what you're saying, option 2 seems a better option because you've talked to all of them and they've agreed. So my understanding is that we need a vote for the business board members to decide on option 1 or option 2. So the executive are kind of saying option 2 is a better option. I tend to agree. I think my job is just take a vote on how many people prefer that we take option 2. If you could raise your hands.
Sorry, I'll withdraw my hand because I wanted to ask a question before we went.
Oh, sure. Sorry. I apologize.
No, it's all right.
Could you ask your question, please?
Yeah, if we don't know what the extent of the changes are with regards to potential reduced funding, how do we compare each of these options? So one of the options, we don't know the extent of the changes to the project because there isn't a clear, this is how little we will produce compared to what we were going to had we received full funding. So I'm not sure I'm in a position to understand which direction to go at this point in time, knowing that they're not going to deliver. If we go for a particular option, they're not going to deliver what they initially said they would. By how much are they not going to deliver?
No, I see your point. Louisa, can you come in?
Yes, I certainly can. In terms of the 3 projects I approached, they were looking at a 10% reduction in the outputs that they could deliver in terms of job creation and apprenticeships.
And Louisa, do they still meet our requirements for the job
Yeah.
creation overall?
Yes, they do. Yeah.
Okay.
They still met the high value for money criteria that had been set by the business board in terms of the criteria.
Okay. Vic, is that enough to satisfy you?
Look, it's the answer I've been given, so I'll use that in making my decision on where I vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so could I ask people who, first of all, any other questions from any of the business board? Okay, I've got Andy Williams first.
I'll point out I'm a non-voting member, so I'll take a view. I mean, I guess my view is more general, and I guess it's from a business perspective. I think if someone comes to me with a business case for a certain amount of money, I assume the due diligence has been done, and therefore that is the right amount of money they should be asking for. So I'm kind of in the camp of we should fully fund what we can fund. If there's a reduced funding available for a 3rd project in this case, I'd rather go and then have a further discussion with them around how they progress on that basis. But I think the danger we have, and it's more of a principle than these projects, you know, on principle, what we don't want is people coming up with inflated or padded out requests for funding, you know, gaming the system.
Yeah.
So I'd rather we progressed in a more authentic way. And if we believe the first 2 are the most valuable, then they're the ones we should be funding. And then we return to the 3rd one with further information. But I would point out that I'm a non-voting member on this one. So
okay.
that's
Louisa, my understanding is that value for money is part of the criteria for judging these projects.
Yes, and external due diligence was carried out across all 6 applications. So they've all, you know, we've established that in terms of their funding requests, yes, it was justified, and yes, it offered value for money.
Okay, thank you, Louisa. Al.
Thanks, Amir. It was probably one that's a follow-up action rather than specific, but I was just conscious in this listing here, both one of the proposed opportunities and one that falls below the line. There's a significant variance between the internal and external scoring. And I just wondered whether there's anything that's worthy of unpicking subsequently as to why there's quite such significant deviation on 2 of those.
Louisa, are you able to answer that question?
Are you able to just point me in the direction of which scores you're looking at, please?
I'm happy to, Louisa, and please feel free if I'm missing the point on it. But the internal versus external scoring for the 2nd and 4th entries in the list have a variance of 15 or 20 points between the scoring.
Yes,
whereas the others seem more in line and consistent. So the question is, when we get a significant variance, is there any additional reflection we need to take as to why there's such a big gap, or whether there's a very significant difference in the weighting that's been applied?
I think on those 2 particular ones, there was an issue around or there was discussion around the weighting. I mean, obviously, internally we use internal officers who may not have the same understanding of things, for example, like subsidy control, etc. Whereas our external due diligence takes that and is and adds quite a lot of weight to the subsidy control issue. And that certainly was an issue on 4. On 2, there was a discussion that we had around indirect jobs and direct jobs. We've always internally counted indirect jobs to be of the same value as direct jobs, whereas our external due diligence put a higher value on direct jobs to indirect jobs, which is where the discrepancy came.
Okay.
Does that answer your question? Sorry, Al.
Okay, thank you, Al. Faye.
Samir, I actually just want to follow up on what Andy said, and I actually really value the fact that you have put that challenge in there. I think my thoughts are very much that these are known projects that we are looking at incremental funding for. I think if there were new projects, I'd wholeheartedly agree with you, Andy, but I think because these are known ones, maybe we want to consider spreading the funds across them to try and get a 10% reduction. I think it still makes each of them quite viable. But thanks, Andy, for the challenge there. I think it was a good one.
Okay, thank you, Faye. So I don't see any more hands. So I think if we could have a vote on option 2 first. How many people are, please raise your hand if you're in agreement with option 2. So I think I'll get to vote as well. So, right, is somebody counting how many people we've got?
Yeah, if I could suggest it, rather than doing that, if we could go through and everyone could indicate which option they would prefer.
Okay, yeah, that could be fine as well. Shall I just call out people's name?
If you'd like to, or I can read through a list.
Yeah, please. If you could go through a list, that'd be better.
Okay. Vic.
Option 2.
And Faye.
Option 2.
And Amir.
Option 2.
And Al.
Option 2.
And Nitin.
You're on mute.
Option 2.
Sorry, Nick, I didn't hear you.
Rebecca.
Option 2.
Thank you. Well, that's unanimous for option 2.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. So the second recommendation is if we can go for that we're declining the projects ranked 4 and below. Yeah. So if there's no disagreement there, we'll go for that. I think can we bring everyone back in?
Yeah, that's fine, Chair. We can bring them back in.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
All back in action. Thank you, Amir. All right, let's pick up with
Sorry, just one thing on this, and I think we talked about it. Why did we only get 6 projects for a big grant like this?
So I've taken off my video. I'm going to start my video again, just so you know I am actually here. We did advertise it. We wrote to all of our projects. We wrote to all of the LGF projects. We had it as an open call on the website, but that's what we got, unfortunately.
And would it be the same for other authorities like this, that there is a sort of view that, you know, when grants come along, there isn't as many people as you'd think? I mean, that's game-changing numbers. So I don't understand really how local companies are not rushing to the doors.
No, I'm happy to share the list of who we shared with, but we went out, as we have done again with our category 2 call for projects. You know, that's gone out to all of your business board members, it's gone out to local authorities, it's on the website, it's
Should we put it in the newspaper?
I don't know whether I want that many applicants.
Just standing from a distance, being new to the process a little bit, but not that new, but these are big grant numbers that would make a big difference to a business. So I just find it.
Yeah, it was, I think your category 1 projects were very, very specific. They were specifically for already existing local growth fund projects. So they were open to those local growth fund projects, or they were open to very high value for money projects. So they were going to create lots of apprenticeships that are over and above where we sat before.
Okay, so they've got to be higher than the traditional performance.
They've got to be higher than the traditional, and I think that did move up. That would have put a lot of organisations off. I mean, we were looking at, previously we've looked at about £10,000 per job, if not better. And on some of these, we were producing £1,000 per job in terms of investment and apprenticeships. So I think they would, you know, it was a big ask from in terms of that value for money that they needed to hit. But
so I know Mayor Nick Johnson is ahead of me, but I can make a comment after Nick, perhaps. Sorry, Austin, didn't want to take over. Back to you.
Well, no, I mean, it's tempting to comment on this, but well, let Nick come in because he's got his hand raised.
Well, I'm sort of conscious we're not really on the agenda, but I would recognise what Nitin says. And Louisa, I don't know if you were laughing deliberately, but I actually think maybe we should never be shy of getting lots of applications. You know, I think it's a bigger, as the mayor and indeed the combined authority, we don't have necessarily the same awareness of a lot of what the combined authority does. That's a job for myself and indeed the board of the combined authority. But as the business board and also as the holders of potential funds, I think it's inherent on the business board to make sure it is more visible. And if that involves being more visible through social media or indeed the newspapers, that's what we should be doing, because we should be the go-to people that people are aware of.
Not that I was being glib in any way, shape or form. Having previously managed some of the COVID grants where we were significantly oversubscribed by 100–200%, and we would have 200–300 applicants, all very disappointed that they did not get any funding. Managing expectations when we have a very limited pot of money is also something that I think the business board have to take into account, that, you know, you have to be able to set criteria and use those criteria. The criteria at this point for our category 1 projects was to fund already existing local growth fund projects, to add some value, to create some really high value outputs and outcomes. And that was what we've done with this particular pot. This second pot of funding, the category 2 funding, which is much larger and much more significant amounts of funding, has been opened up as wide as we have. I think we've certainly gone out into social media on our category 2, but we didn't with our category 1, because I think we were mindful that it's very difficult managing expectations when funds are limited.
Thank you. I see Amir and Faye have the hands raised. My apologies, I thought you guys had dispensed with this issue, but if it needs a little bit more airtime.
Sorry, Faye. Yes, I had me.
Yeah, thank you. I agree, Austin. I think that some of this we have actually discussed at previous meetings, and Louisa, thanks for that explanation. You know, we were very oversubscribed on previous calls, and this was a very specific call. It wasn't something that everyone could respond. And I think at our last discussion on it, we actually talked about other interventions. So yes, there's social media, but is that necessarily going to drive an action? Maybe not. But we need to train people and educate them on how to fill these forms in as well. And I think that's definitely something we can take as an action. But I think context, as always, is a really important word in this, certainly in this level of funding.
So I just want to make a comment. In my previous job, I used to be the deliverer of these projects, and asking for £5,000 per job or £10,000 per job is a very difficult ask. And for people who have to deliver it, remember they have to pay back the money if they don't create the jobs. And with the conditions that we're under at the moment due to COVID and high inflation, people are a bit worried about how they're going to deliver at £5,000 or £10,000 per job. So I think we need to be conscious of that it's a big undertaking for anyone applying. Thanks.
Thank you, Amir. All right, let's bring this matter to a close so we can move on with the rest of the agenda. What I would suggest, though, I mean, Faye's spot on. The business board's decision as to how they would shape this funding and the requirements for the applications of it were debated and agreed 2 or 3 meetings ago. And if you really want to refresh your thinking and understand that, what the drivers were, one of them was that there's a time limit on burning the funding off here, which meant you couldn't start with a clean sheet of paper with a lot of opportunities. All the money has to go back to government. So, and I think enough said. If you really want to understand it, go back through the previous meeting papers where the decisions were made. As far as I can see here, officers have done what we asked them to do as a board in that respect. Let's move on, please. I wonder if we could ask Alan Downton, please. Alan, Deputy Chief Officer of the Business Board, will present the Economic Growth Strategy Report, please. Alan.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, Board. The Economic Growth Strategy has been consulted on and had input from obviously your good selves, the Mayor, and it's been developed through workshops with a wide circle of partners and stakeholders for their input, including the Business Advisory Panel, all of the constituent local authority CEOs and economic development officers. In addition, the Chair, Vice Chair of the Business Board, the Mayor, and officers of the Combined Authority convened individual meetings with each of the local authority leaders, and feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. The strategy has 6 core priorities for economic growth: reduce inequalities, improve quality of life, accelerating local placemaking and renewal, ensure transition to green low carbon economy, accelerating business growth, creating good quality jobs in high performing businesses, and supporting people to develop quality skills in a world-class system. Section 1 of the report sets out the purpose, Section 2 sets out the background, Section 3 sets out the next steps. We are seeking the Business Board to recommend and endorse the Economic Growth Strategy for the combined Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and recommend approval of this Economic Growth Strategy to the Combined Authority. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alan. Questions? I know this has already had an awful lot of debate in its construction, so hopefully there are no really difficult issues here. But any questions, anyone? Al?
Yeah, it's not really a question, it's more of a statement really, which is I just think there's a real positive here about the level of co-production that's taken place on this particular document, and I think there has been a lot of opportunity for brainstorming and sharing of ideas, which often is talked about, but sometimes doesn't always materialize at the level that you hope. But in this case, I think there's a real positive in how this has been pulled together.
Thank you, Al. Andy Williams.
I agree with that. I think we have worked on this a long time. I think it gives us a strong narrative that we can go to central government with, using our regional capabilities to drive the improvements that we're discussing. The only thing I'm still a bit sad about is on Appendix 2, good growth, we managed to get double GVA into that inner circle, which is something I think I've mentioned several times, but it seems to have disappeared from Appendix 1, the actual economic strategy. To me, reminding central government when we go there that we're going to do all these things in the context of doubling GVA is not a naked economic growth ambition. It actually adds to the excitement. We are going to do all those things and we're still going to be able to double GVA, I think is a really compelling narrative. And we need to make sure we maintain the link between the two. But otherwise, I think it's a great document now. I think if we can all buy into this, everyone gets behind it, I think we have a chance to improve our narrative into central government.
Thank you, Andy. Noted.
Thanks, Andy. The issue of that particular diagram has been raised previously by me, Alan, about exactly the point that's made, that it's almost a trademark of what we're about. So let's make sure we're consistent with that.
Yep, I've got that done, Chair. Apologies.
Andy Neely.
Again, very supportive of this. Alan, can you say a bit about what happens next? I mean, it goes off to the Combined Authority Board for ratification as well. But then, just picking up on Andy Williams's points, there is quite a compelling narrative in here. We've got some of the interventions where we've got potential funding sources, but we just talked about the relatively low levels of UK SPF that we managed to get in this region last time round. So we've got to think about how we actually get the resource to support some of these projects. Otherwise, they will just remain as nice ideas on a bit of paper. So strategy for getting the funding to support some of these things?
So the plan, Andy, is, well, there's a couple of things. One is talking to the Combined Authority about how this works, whether there's an economic growth board, economic strategy board, what that forum is. Also, my team and I are now looking at, well, we've got obviously Metro Dynamics doing some work behind the scenes to support us in building some of these cases. We've also got a procurement out for additional resource and support. And also my team and I are looking at other departments within government that we traditionally haven't got funding from that might be able to support us in other areas. So outside of BEIS and the normal, remit. So that's where I think we sit at the moment.
So there may be a role here for the business board once this strategy has been through the Combined Authority Board of both, I guess, helping work up stroke comment on individual business cases around the interventions.
Yes.
But also potentially championing particular bits of this. So you could take, the lifelong learning and say, well, actually we'd like X and Y on the business board to be really working with us to try and land this in the Department for Education and persuade them that this is something that this region cares about. And if it was a joint business board, Combined Authority Board approach, that might be quite a powerful way of us both working together, but getting the message across to central government. So I hope we can have a subsequent discussion about the implementation plan, if you like.
Yep. Absolutely.
Perhaps worth reflecting on that, those comments, Alan.
Yep.
With respect to the future meeting planned with the CPCA leaders, to move a step beyond what we've got here, hopefully.
Yes. Yep.
All right. I don't see any other hands raised. Please shout if I'm missing anyone. Nick, is that your hand raised? Sorry. No. You're on mute, Nick. I'll take that as a no, will I?
Sorry, my hand, Chair?
Nick Johnson, Mayor.
Sorry, no, my hand wasn't up. I was just reading, and I was holding my hand like that. So my apologies.
All right, no worries. All right, I don't see any other hands then. So we'll move this to a recommendation. There are two recommendations, A and B. Recommendation A is to endorse the economic growth strategy for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and B, recommend approval of the economic growth strategy to the Combined Authority Board for their approval. Can I ask if anyone has any objections to either one of those recommendations, in which case we'll consider it a unanimous decision. All right, I don't see any objections. We'll consider that unanimously approved on both counts. Thank you. Thank you, Alan. Good job. Well done. Moving now to item 3.2, the skills boot camps evaluation. And I believe we've got Fliss Miller, the Interim Associate Director for Skills, who will present the boot camps evaluation report. Fliss, are you with us?
I am indeed. Good afternoon, Chair and fellow board members. You may recall that when we were awarded the monies to deliver the boot camps, the business board requested a paper evaluating the delivery of the boot camps. So the combined authority was successful in a consortium bid to deliver digital boot camps across the east of England under the DFE Wave 2. Perhaps not surprisingly for a new initiative, we faced a number of challenges when delivering this contract. First being that the contract was originally supposed to be awarded in April, and we received notification in the summer. In addition to that, we also pulled together a consortium of 9 delivery partners, and only 2 delivery partners were awarded to us by the department. Of those 2 providers, one provider faced significant challenges when taking forward the delivery of boot camps, and rather than enrolling the 400 learners, only managed to secure 38 learners. And so therefore, we had to identify a new provider in January to pick up some of those boot camp numbers. It's a new initiative, it's very different. Whilst ITPs, independent training providers, are quite fleet of foot, we often find with colleges it takes longer to deliver such new provision. We've learned a number of lessons along the way, and we've subsequently been successful with a proposal to the Department for Education for Wave 3 of boot camp funding. This time we'll be covering a number of additional discipline areas such as the green economy, advanced manufacturing, construction, accelerated routes into apprenticeships. The difference with this funding is that it will be grant funded, and therefore that allows us greater flexibilities. And we're currently running our own procurement exercise to be able to engage with and contract with the providers of choice going forward. The new contract that we've been awarded will also just be for the combined authority area rather than for the wider east of England. So we're still delivering under Wave 2 of the digital boot camps. We currently have over 500 learners on programme, which falls short from the 800 we originally anticipated. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Fliss. Questions for Fliss? Faye?
Probably more of an observation than a question, actually, Fliss. Thank you very much for the update. I think it's positive still. You know, 564 people gone through the programme. That's good. That's an achievement. And I think the most important thing from my perspective is that we learn. Like you say, it was new. Let's not beat ourselves up about it. Let's just learn from it and commission it, you know, differently in the future. So again, I'm forever an optimist. I think it's positive that we've had those people go through the programme.
Thank you. Yeah, and lots of positives, as you say. Perhaps I focused too much on the negatives there in the report.
Well said, Faye. Vic?
Yeah, I want to just come in on the back of what Faye's just said. Look, for me, when we set a target like this, we expect the environment to carry on progressing in the way we wanted it to. It didn't. There were clear macro impacts on this. And I think the fact we got to 564 is testament to the fact it's been a good program. And I'm really pleased to see that they've managed to get additional funding, and the focus now being on the combined authority area will enable us to be even more precise with it. So well done, Fliss and the team. I think it's good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vic. The question for me, Fliss, to what extent are we able to shape the subject matter areas and align them with, we've got lots of individual sector strategies. We've got our overall growth strategy. Often these give rise to, pockets of constraints where the skills don't exist. Are we able to better shape that now in the delivery of this programme?
We are. So we have to submit a proposal to the department, and so therefore we have some constraints around that. However, our proposal, as you would expect, is focused on our priority growth sectors and also recognising the expansion of development of the new green economy as well. So therefore it's very much aligned to our priorities of how we take this forward. There are some constraints, we can't deliver it in every subject area, but those that we can align to our growth sectors, we are totally aligned.
Brilliant, thank you. All righty, I don't see any other hands raised for questions. This is a recommendation only to note the report on the performance and skills boot camps. And I think on behalf of the board to thank Fliss for a job well done actually here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job. All right, let's move on. Item 3.3, the nomination of business board representatives for the Combined Authority Board. Following this meeting, a separate meeting is being held to consider the feedback from an independent business board evaluation that's been carried out. One of the issues that this will cover is representation of the business board on the Combined Authority Board, and I consider it appropriate to discuss feedback on this matter before settling on a nomination for the Combined Authority Board. I also have some concerns about the detail in this paper and how it's been presented, which I would like to get straightened out with officers on some constitutional matters before it comes back to us. Therefore, this item will be deferred to a later date following the discussion of the business board evaluation feedback. Hopefully not very long, frankly. I think we can get this cleaned up very quickly, but not here and now. There are no issues with that. We will defer it and come back to it. So moving on to item 3.4, Business Board Expenses and Allowances 21-22. I believe Emily is going to present a report on expenses and allowances for the last municipal year, please. Emily, be with us.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, members. This report presents the remuneration and expenses paid to private sector business board members for the period 1st of April 2021 to 31st of March 2022. As stated in the Business Board Allowances Scheme, it is a requirement to provide an annual summary of remuneration and expenses paid to members under the scheme. This report simply asks the board to note this summary presented and the publication of this on the Combined Authority website. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Anyone have any questions on this at all? We're just fulfilling an obligation to make it public. Thank you. Well done, Emily. Thank you. The recommendation here is simply to note the summary of remuneration and expenses paid to members during 21-22 under the Business Board Expenses and Allowances Scheme. Anyone have any objections in any way to that, or can we note it and move on? All right, thank you. Future meetings. Moving to agenda item 4.1, the Business Board headlines for the Combined Authority. I mean, the only significant headline issue here is 3.1, which is the economic growth strategy, notably endorsed and approved today. I would hope that we would get a very positive reception to that at the Combined Authority Board, given the extent to which everyone has been consulted and had their opportunity to review and help shape that over time. I'll carry that forward to the Combined Authority meeting. Andy, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I was just wondering actually, because in light of the election, there'll be some changed membership of the Combined Authority Board, whether we want to try and get an excuse me, early conversation in with any new members of the Combined Authority Board once we know who they are, so we can give them a chance to have input, and whether we could do that before the actual Combined Authority Board meeting, I don't know, but it's worth thinking about.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Andy. Alan, maybe you could give some thought to that as the dust settles over the next couple of days.
Yeah, we and officers are considering that already. Yes.
All right, perfect. Thank you. All righty, moving on then to agenda item 4.2, which is the Business Board Forward Plan. The Forward Plan has been published, previously discussed by the Business Board. Does anyone have any comments or queries on the Forward Plan? All right. I don't see any hands raised. Therefore, I'll bring the meeting to a close. The next Business Board meeting will be on Monday, the 11th of July, 2022. We've gotten ourselves home a little early in this meeting, so bought you a bit of time to go and have a cup of tea, perhaps. Those members who are joining the rest of the board at 4:30 in a private session, I look forward to seeing you then. Meanwhile, thank you, everyone. Thank you, officers.